At Thanksgiving, my sister discovered I had $2 million, and my family demanded I give it to her, claiming she deserved it more. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your support. We're a brand new channel, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us grow. It's quick, it's free, and it allows us to keep bringing you incredible stories like this one. Your support really means everything. Thank you so much. Now, let's get into the video. Using a throwaway account for obvious reasons, and I've altered some details to protect privacy. Let's just say I'm Sarah, 38, and I'm finally telling the truth about what really happened. Ever grow up in a household where one kid is the center of the universe, and the other is more like furniture? That's been my life since I was 8. Before then, it was just me. My parents weren't overly affectionate, but they were there. Mom helped with school projects. Dad would sometimes take me to fish off the dock behind Lake Orion. It wasn't warm and fuzzy, but it worked. Then one night, my world changed. I remember waking up to my Aunt Denise standing by my bed, telling me I had to pack quickly. My mom was in the hospital. I didn't understand at the time, but Rachel, my little sister, was being born 2 months early. The following weeks were full of hospital visits and whispers. Rachel was tiny and frail, barely bigger than a loaf of bread. She was always surrounded by beeping monitors and sterile equipment. I wasn't even allowed to touch her. That was the start of it. The moment everything around me stopped, including me. Once Rachel came home, our house transformed. It went from lived-in to something that felt like a medical lab. Hand sanitizer pumps mounted on every wall, industrial bleach wipes stacked in every room, and air purifiers humming nonstop. If I sneezed, I was gone, packed off to Grandma's or Aunt Denise's. And it wasn't temporary. If I had a sniffle, or so much as a tickle in my throat, I was out of the house. At first, I liked it. Grandma Ruby would bake cookies and tell me stories about growing up during the war. Aunt Denise had a huge bookcase of detective novels that I devoured like candy. But kids notice patterns. I started to understand. I wasn't being treated. I was being removed. Like a contaminant. My presence was a risk. That's when I started trying harder. I thought maybe if I worked hard enough, they'd notice me again. Straight A's. Extra credit. I even taught myself how to play Clair de Lune on the piano by watching tutorials. But it didn't matter. I once built a model of a solar-powered desalination plant for the science fair, took first place. My dad glanced at it and said, "Just put it in the garage." Rachel's allergic to something in the glue. Rachel's flute recital. Everyone showed up. My piano solo that I practiced for months, canceled because Rachel had a slight fever. By middle school, Rachel had figured out exactly how to manipulate things. She would say she had a stomachache to get out of school, or that her head hurt to avoid cleaning her room. Mom would rush to her aid like she'd been shot. Meanwhile, if I needed anything, even a ride, I'd get a lecture about being self-sufficient. So, I disappeared into my books. I filled my room with vintage art guides, old postcards, and flea market finds. Lavender air spray became my signature scent, mostly because Rachel hated it. She claimed she was allergic, so my room became the one place in the house where she wouldn't go. I didn't even realize it, but I was building my own world. Grandma Ruby noticed before anyone else. She let me help sort her massive costume jewelry collection. I labeled every brooch and earring like I was curating a museum exhibit. She laughed at how serious I was about it, but I think she knew it made me feel seen. The worst part wasn't being forgotten, it was how they explained it away. Rachel needs more attention. Sarah's the strong one. You're so mature, you understand. No, I didn't understand. I was a kid. I didn't know why being healthy made me less deserving of affection. Those years shaped me. I stopped waiting for recognition. If something good happened, I clapped for myself. Nobody else was going to. High school was my escape plan. I treated it like a launch pad. I had binders labeled by week, study notes color-coded like a military operation. I joined the debate team, the yearbook committee, the student newspaper, anything that kept me busy and helped me build my resume. Rachel called me Rain Woman once. I didn't care. Every minute I put into planning was a brick in the wall between me and that house. Debate was where I found my voice. Nothing felt better than winning an argument based purely on logic and calm delivery. I won regionals twice. My parents missed both competitions. Rachel had a soccer game. She was on the bench, by the way. Junior year changed everything. I scored a perfect 1600 on the SAT. Not great score. Not almost perfect. Flawless. I checked the score at the library after school and stared at the screen like it was lying to me. I ran home, thinking maybe, just maybe, this would finally get a reaction. My mom was in the kitchen helping Rachel write a paper on The Great Gatsby. I held up the printed score report like I was holding a trophy. Mom, I got a perfect SAT score. Her response, "That's nice, sweetie. Try to keep it down. Rachel's got a big test tomorrow." Rachel chimed in with, "Some of us have to study, you know. Not everyone's a robot. No fridge magnet. No celebration. Just silence." Meanwhile, when Rachel got a B+ in English, there were balloons. I applied to 12 universities, Columbia, NYU, Michigan, and a bunch of others. I didn't tell anyone. I wrote all the essays, asked for recommendations, and submitted everything myself. My parents were too wrapped up in Rachel's college prep to even ask. Then one day, I opened an envelope in the mailroom after school. Full ride to Columbia. Tuition, room, board, the works. I cried in the stairwell. Not because I was happy, but because it was the first time I saw an actual door out. At dinner, I announced it like it was just a passing thought. "I'm going to Columbia. Full ride." You'd think I said I was moving to the moon. "New York? That's far," Mom said, glancing at Rachel. Rachel rolled her eyes. "Can I have your room then? I need space for my video setup." Dad grunted. "We can't help with any moving costs, just so you know. Rachel's camp fees are due." That summer, I worked 2 jobs. My main gig was at Wendy's Country Grill, where the owner, also named Wendy, became like a second mom. She made sure I got extra tips, and even packed me leftover pie slices to take home. On move-in day, my parents didn't come. Rachel had a cheerleading competition. Aunt Denise drove me. She helped me set up my dorm, and handed me a card from Grandma Ruby with $500 in cash inside. I later found out Grandma had been skipping her medications to save up that money. That night, as I lay in my new room, watching the city lights flicker through the blinds, I made a promise. I wasn't going to prove anything to anyone. I was just going to build a life that made it impossible to ignore me ever again. College was chaos, in the best way. Between all-nighters, communal showers, and an absurd amount of instant noodles, I felt something I had never experienced before, freedom. No one checking my temperature before letting me in the living room. No one wiping down door handles after I walked past. Just me and my thoughts, and an entire campus that didn't know I was the other one. I majored in art history, with a concentration in decorative arts and antiquities. Translation, I was finally allowed to be obsessed with the past. Most of my classmates rolled their eyes at the coursework, but for me, it felt like a puzzle I'd been waiting years to solve. I graduated magna cum laude. My parents didn't come. Not even a card. They were helping Rachel transfer colleges again. 3rd time's the charm, right? I wasn't even mad. I was free. After graduation, I landed a job at a mid-tier estate auction house in New Jersey. I'll call it ENV, though that's not the real name. It was the kind of place you'd miss if you walked too fast past the storefront, but inside, there were treasures. Boxes of inherited heirlooms. Furniture from dead tycoons. Jewelry no one had worn in 70 years. Most of it wasn't glamorous. I was the new girl, so my days were spent cataloging chipped tea sets and Googling dates on old coins. But I didn't care. I was learning every single day. It reminded me of cataloging Grandma Ruby's brooches, except now it was real. The turning point came about 5 months in. We were clearing out the estate of a woman named Mrs. Althea Kingsley. She passed away at 92. No kids, no close relatives. Her brownstone was crammed with boxes of old-fashioned jewelry. Everyone dismissed it as costume, beads, fake pearls, rhinestones. A few pieces went straight to the donation bin. But one brooch caught my attention. It was tucked in a corner of a faded jewelry box, partially wrapped in tissue. Nothing about it screamed valuable, but when I picked it up, it felt wrong. Too heavy. The clasp was an old-style European hook I'd seen in books. And the stones, they didn't have that plastic shimmer. They refracted like actual minerals. I took it home that night and spent 3 hours with my magnifier and laptop. I was shaking. The piece matched a limited 1927 collection made by a now-defunct French atelier. If it was real, It wasn't just worth a few hundred, it could be tens of thousands. The next morning, I brought it to my manager, Mr. Arnett. I was nervous. He had never shown much interest in my work, and I half expected him to wave it off. Instead, he frowned, turned it over, then pulled out his own loop. "Where'd you find this?" "Kingsley Estate," I said. "It was in the last box." He didn't say anything else, just nodded. 2 weeks later, that brooch sold for $19,000. After the auction, Arnett gave me a look I hadn't seen before. Not dismissal, not indifference. It was respect. That's when everything changed. Suddenly I was being looped into meetings. I was asked to double-check item assessments. The other staff started bringing me oddball items they couldn't figure out. I'd walk into work and find things waiting on my desk. Odd pins, strange buckles, mystery lockets. I threw myself into it. Nights were spent reading old auction records and studying gemstone properties. I signed up for an online gemology course and saved up for a professional grade scale. My crappy studio apartment was slowly turning into a mini authentication lab, and I was good at it. Over the next year, I authenticated over a dozen pieces that had been completely misclassified, some as high as $30,000. My finds brought in six-figure returns for the company. Still, my parents had no idea. They thought I worked at an antique place somewhere in New Jersey. Rachel once joked on a family call that maybe I could help her sell her old bracelets on Etsy. Mom still introduced me to relatives as Sarah, the one with the weird job. I didn't care. I had something now, something that was mine. Then came the Rothschild job. E&V had been contracted to catalog part of an estate connected to the Rothschild banking family through a distant American relative. It was a massive assignment. The jewelry inventory alone was 300 pieces. Most were already known, archived in databases, photographed in old catalogs. But tucked inside a velvet pouch was a single item without a record. A delicate Art Nouveau pendant with a blue fire opal at its center. Everyone assumed it was decorative. Pretty, but unremarkable. The opal seemed dull under the office lights. But something about the setting gnawed at me. The gold work had these hand-chiseled etchings that didn't match typical mass-produced patterns. I compared it to other known jewelers, even traveled to a private collection in Manhattan to compare it under a loupe. It matched. It was one of 7 pendants created by Émile Duval in 1903 and thought lost during the German occupation in France. That pendant sold for $92,000. Mr. Arnett pulled me aside after the auction. "You know, you could run your own house one day," he said. I laughed. "Sure. With what capital?" "My student loan debt." He shrugged. "Just saying. You've got an eye. And that's something money can't buy." It stuck with me. The idea that maybe, just maybe, I could make something of my own. I started taking freelance jobs on the side. Small-time collectors. Boutique dealers. I used a second-hand laptop and met people at coffee shops with my portable scale in my bag. I charged less than the big firms, but offered reports twice as detailed. Word spread. Slowly. The money wasn't much. A few hundred here, a couple thousand there. But it was the first time someone paid me directly for what I knew. Not for clocking in. Not for moving boxes. For knowledge I had carved out of years of study and pure obsession. Around that time, I upgraded apartments. It was still small, but it had a separate room I could use as a workspace. I wallpapered it with vintage auction ads, pinned up gemstone charts, and installed 3 different kinds of lighting. I felt like a jeweler version of Batman in a cave. And the clients kept coming. One day, a private collector brought me a box of family trinkets he had inherited. I spent the whole weekend analyzing them. 2 turned out to be 19th century mourning pins with engraved onyx. Another, a previously undocumented Edwardian hair ornament worth $15,000. He paid me $4,000 and told 2 friends. One of them flew in from Chicago to meet me. That was the moment I realized something bigger was happening. But I still hadn't told my family. They thought I was trying to start something online and probably imagined me selling bracelets on Instagram. Rachel texted one day asking if I could help her evaluate a necklace she got at a flea market. I didn't respond. I liked the secret, the quiet power of it. I'd sit through family dinners and discount cardigans that were actually vintage Escada, eating Mom's overdone chicken while Rachel bragged about her entry-level marketing job. No one knew that the tiny pendant around my neck, plain gold to their eyes, was a restored piece from the 1870s worth more than Rachel's car. No one asked, and that was fine. Because the thing about being invisible your whole life is, once you realize no one's watching, you can do anything. The idea of starting my own business didn't come like lightning. It was more like a slow boil. Every time someone asked if I'd ever thought about doing this for real, it lingered just a little longer in the back of my mind. The tipping point was a collector from Ohio, wealthy, discreet, and obsessive about Victorian morning jewelry. I authenticated 6 pieces from his family's attic, and he was so impressed with the report that he mailed me a handwritten thank you note and a check for $6,000. For a moment, I just stared at it. Then I did the math. Between my freelance gigs and my day job at the auction house, I was burning out. I was working 60 hours a week, sleeping maybe 4. I had no social life, no balance, but I did have something I'd never had before, leverage. So I made a decision. I quit. To everyone else, it seemed crazy. My coworkers at ENV looked at me like I had just announced I was moving to the Arctic. Even Mr. Arnett, who had once hinted I could run my own house, pulled me aside and said, "You sure? This business isn't kind to newcomers." I said yes, but the truth? I wasn't sure. Not at all. I took every penny I had saved and rented a tiny office above a dry cleaner in a part of town most people tried to avoid. It smelled constantly of steamed polyester and bad aftershave, but it was cheap and it was mine. I bought a folding table from a discount store, borrowed a desk chair from a friend, and stacked my books along the window ledge. My waiting area was a folding stool and a chipped coffee pot I never used. I didn't even have a proper sign, just a name I'd scribbled in pen on a piece of paper and taped to the inside of the glass. I called it Verity Authenticators. The first few months were brutal. Some days, no one came. Other days, I had back-to-back appointments and still ended the day with only $200 to show for it. I skipped meals. I sold my laptop and used an old desktop tower from college. I washed my clothes in my bathtub to save money. I started counting how many months I had left before I'd run out of rent money. But then, slowly, things began to shift. A retired antiques dealer brought in a necklace she'd inherited and didn't know what to do with. I confirmed it was a rare Belle Epoque era piece. It sold at auction for $18,000, and she insisted on giving me a 10% finder's fee. Then a local antique store owner referred a couple of his customers to me. Then a former classmate from Columbia, now working at a museum, reached out and asked if I'd consult on a potential acquisition. Word was spreading. 6 months in, I had enough money to buy proper lights and a second-hand gemstone microscope. I even bought a printer, not new, but it didn't jam every other page like my old one. One night, I came home, sat on the floor of my tiny apartment with a bottle of $2 wine and cried. Not because I was scared, but because I'd made it through the part one thought would break me. By the end of year 1, I'd seen over 100 clients. And then came my biggest break yet. A private family from Connecticut had heard about me through a referral chain I still don't fully understand. Their grandmother had passed, leaving behind a junk drawer of old jewelry no one had looked through in years. They wanted me to come out and take a look. I borrowed a suit jacket from a friend, took a $28 Greyhound bus, and arrived at a massive stone house that looked like it had never seen dust. They gave me a tray of tangled chains, dull stones, and a crumpled ring box. It took me 3 hours of quiet examination before I found it, a gold and enamel pendant with a faint marking nearly worn away. I photographed it, cleaned it, and compared it to records in the French National Archive. The piece was a signed 1891 creation from a forgotten Parisian artisan named Marchand, thought to be extinct after the fire of 1896. It was valued at over $140,000. I got a call from the family 2 weeks later. The pendant had sold, and they wanted me to authenticate everything else they owned. They also mailed me a check, $14,000. My largest commission to date. After that, everything changed. I could finally move out of my apartment. I found a modest place in a decent part of the city. Nothing fancy, but it had 2 rooms, one for living, one for work. I framed my business license and mounted it behind my desk. I even hired help. Her name was Natalie, fresh out of a gemology program. Shy but laser-focused. She reminded me of me in every way. Overlooked, underestimated, but sharp as a blade. She came on part-time at first, and soon I was paying her full-time. My parents still had no idea. They thought I was trying out this jewelry hobby and probably believed I was still scraping by. Rachel continued to send me funny TikToks about girls with Etsy stores and captioned them, "ULOL." One day, she messaged me asking if I could authenticate a ring her boyfriend got her from a boutique. I didn't respond. The truth is, I liked the invisibility. I liked knowing that while they were out there thinking I was some quirky artsy dropout, I was building a company that now had a waiting list. Every week, I walked into high-rises, estates, museums, and auction houses, and no one questioned whether I belonged. I did. There was one moment, though, that I'll never forget. I was walking through a hotel lobby downtown, heading to a private valuation session. As I crossed the room, I heard someone call my name. "Sarah!" I turned. It was a former classmate from high school. "Amanda something." "Oh my God," she said, blinking. "You look different." I was wearing my usual muted gray wrap coat, carrying my leather authentication kit. Understated, polished. She looked like she had just come from her kid's karate class. "What are you up to?" she asked. I smiled. "I run a jewelry authentication firm." "Oh, like pawn shop stuff." I just smiled again. "Something like that." I didn't feel the need to explain. That night, back in my office, I signed paperwork on a new partnership with a luxury auction house in Chicago. Things were growing. Verity was now known in 4 states. We had 2 employees, contracts with 3 galleries, and enough business that I could finally take 1 day off a week. I still didn't tell my family. Why? Because I already knew how it would go. Rachel would roll her eyes. Mom would call it a cute little shop. Dad would ask if I needed help filing taxes. So I said nothing. But I did start playing a game. At the next family dinner, I wore a minimalist pair of antique earrings I had authenticated myself. Early 20th century design. Appraised at $4,500. Rachel complimented them. "Cute," she said. "Did you get those at Target?" I smiled. "Something like that." Thanksgiving used to be my least favorite day of the year. Not because I dislike the holiday. I love it, actually. But in my family, Thanksgiving meant forced smiles, undercooked turkey, and being repeatedly reminded that I was the quirky daughter with the little business. Every year, the same script. Rachel would walk in with her dramatic blowout and designer knockoffs. Mom would beam like the queen of suburbia, and I'd stand in the corner, offering to help with the green beans, only to be told, "Oh, just relax, honey. Rachel's taking care of everything." So when Mom called 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I wasn't surprised to hear her sighing into the phone. "Honey," she said, "I don't think I can handle dinner this year. My back is acting up again. Between your dad's knees and my sciatica, it's too much." I said the words before I could think. "I'll handle it this year. Don't worry about it." There was a long pause on the other end. "Catering?" Mom asked, voice full of suspicion. "Sarah, you can't afford that." "I've been saving." I lied. "Consider it my treat." Truthfully, I just couldn't stomach another Thanksgiving pretending to enjoy her dry turkey and box mixed stuffing. And I wanted the food to be good. For once, I called a luxury caterer I'd used for a private valuation event earlier that year, the kind of company that didn't even list prices online. Everything was top tier. Maple glazed Brussels sprouts, truffle mac and cheese, turkey with citrus herb brine. The bill was the equivalent of what my family assumed I earned in 2 months. Thanksgiving morning, I woke up early to monitor an international auction out of Hong Kong. One of my clients was bidding on a rare necklace that required real-time authentication if they won. I packed my laptop, slipped into a muted cashmere sweater, and headed over to my parents' house with the catering van trailing behind me. The table was beautiful. The food was better than anything anyone in that house had ever tasted. And of course, Rachel had to comment. As we were plating the dishes, she scrunched her nose and said, "You catered? From a store." I smiled. Not exactly. Mom was bustling around, half apologizing to guests. "I feel terrible not cooking, but my back, you know." Sarah insisted on handling it. She saved up just to make this happen. I stepped into my childhood bedroom after dessert to check the auction. It was unchanged, the same lavender walls, the same bookshelf full of my old paperbacks. Rachel's room, I had noticed earlier, had been renovated. Again. The auction was heating up. I had 10 tabs open. Bank portals, valuation tools, encrypted messages from my client. My laptop screen looked like mission control. That's when Rachel barged in. She didn't knock. Of course not. She never did. Hey, do you have a phone charger? I barely looked up. Yeah, on the desk. She wandered over and caught sight of my laptop screen. I should have closed it. I was distracted. What's this? She asked, squinting. Client account. Pending. 200 wait. Is that dollars or... I stood up, reaching for the laptop. Rachel, seriously don't. But it was too late. She snatched the laptop and sprinted into the dining room, shouting, Everyone, look what Sarah's really been up to. The room froze. No one moved. No one spoke. Rachel flipped the screen around, beaming like she was about to unveil a scandal. Instead, my current bank balance stared back at them. $2,046,891.12. Below it, a pending wire transfer from a Hong Kong auction house. $478,000. A client ledger showing a recent commission, $160,000. The room was silent except for the ticking of the antique clock I had gifted Mom 3 years ago. She thought it was from a thrift store. It wasn't. Rachel blinked. Her voice cracked. This can't be real. Mom leaned forward, confused. Rachel, what is this? Rachel, now visibly shaking, whispered, She's rich. Sarah's rich. The silence deepened. And then Mom started laughing. Oh, come on, she said, brushing her napkin. Sarah, she works at that little antique place. This has to be a joke. I stood up and cleared my throat. Actually, Mom, I own a jewelry authentication firm. Offices in 3 cities. That antique place was the beginning. I've been running my company for almost 5 years now. Dad dropped his fork. Aunt Denise dropped her wine glass. Rachel just stared. Mom's face changed. From amusement to disbelief to fury in less than 5 seconds. You've had money this whole time, she snapped. I've sent you money. Every month, I said. For over 3 years now. $7,000, I added. Monthly. To help with bills. To help with Rachel's loans. Mom's face turned crimson. 7,000? That's all. You let us struggle while sitting on millions. Rachel's voice cracked. You're unbelievable. You betrayed us. Dad stood up now too. We're your parents. We raised you. We sacrificed for you. And you hide this. I lost it. You raised me. I said, my voice rising. You shipped me off the second I showed a symptom. You ignored every achievement I had because it might make Rachel feel bad. You told me I was mature and independent, but really, I was just easy to forget. You spent thousands on Rachel's camps, schools, hobbies, and I got silence. And now you're mad because I built something on my own. The whole table exploded. Mom shouting about family loyalty. Rachel crying. Dad pacing and ranting. Meanwhile, the caterers awkwardly served pie, trying to pretend they weren't witnessing a breakdown of generational proportions. I grabbed my laptop, my handbag, a vintage designer piece Mom had once complimented as a cute knockoff, and walked out. Behind me, I heard Mom muttering something about Rachel's MBA and finally getting a decent car. As I got into my park sedan, a limited edition hybrid worth more than Rachel's condo, my phone started buzzing. 47 messages in under an hour. Rachel had already started posting on social media. So hurt. Found out my sister's been hoarding money while we struggled. Can't believe it. Family is supposed to stick together. I turned off notifications. That night, I sat in my apartment, sipped tea from a bone china cup I had authenticated myself, and watched the fallout unfold. I had a feeling things were just getting started. The 48 hours after Thanksgiving were pure chaos. My phone lit up nonstop. Calls, texts, voice messages, Instagram DMs, even emails from cousins I hadn't spoken to in over a decade. The messages started off emotional. Then they turned aggressive. Mom, we need to talk like adults. Your sister deserves help with her future. We've already called a realtor. Rachel needs to be in a better neighborhood. Why aren't you answering me? I'm your mother. Rachel, naturally, went full performance mode. She wrote a massive Facebook post about how she'd always supported her sister's little hobby and was devastated to learn I'd been hiding millions. She even included a photo from my childhood, where I was maybe 11, holding a ribbon from a science fair. Caption: I always believed in her. The comments were exactly what you'd expect. How could she hide this? Family comes first. Money changes people. One of our distant cousins commented. Sounds like she owes you. I didn't reply to any of it, but the drama didn't stop online. Monday morning, I arrived at my office to find Mom, Dad, and Rachel sitting in the reception area. Jenny, my receptionist, looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. They said they had an appointment, she whispered. Rachel stood up, clutching her overpriced handbag like it was a briefcase. We've discussed everything, she said, like she was a lawyer. And we think it's only fair you set up trust funds. For the family. Mom nodded, dead serious. We're not asking for everything. Just our share. Rachel needs at least $2 million to start fresh. And we'd like to retire comfortably. Maybe Florida. I stared at them, stunned. You want me to give you, what, a third of my net worth? Rachel crossed her arms. Compared to what you have, it's not much. Do you know how long I've been sending you money? I asked. Mom waved her hand. That's not the point. You had more. That was the moment. The one where something inside me snapped. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and canceled the monthly transfer. Right there in front of them. Mom gasped. Rachel's eyes widened. Dad turned red. You can't just cut us off, Mom hissed. We're your parents. No, I said calmly. You're people I used to support out of guilt. That's over. Security had to escort them out. Mom was yelling about ungrateful children. Rachel sobbed, so hard the receptionist looked physically uncomfortable. I didn't press charges, but I did have their names added to the Do Not Admit list at the front desk. It didn't end there. For weeks, they tried everything. Fake numbers, voicemails pretending to be distant relatives, even an email to my company's customer support, pretending to be a concerned client asking for a callback. I had to involve my lawyer. We sent a cease and desist letter. I was prepared to file for a restraining order if needed. And then they tried their final move. Mom called Grandma Ruby. That was a mistake. Grandma didn't scold me. She didn't plead. She just said, good for you. It's about time someone in this family stopped apologizing for their success. Mom didn't speak to her for 2 months after that. 6 months have passed. I moved to a new house. Nothing flashy, but secure in mine. Full of sunlight, books, and peace. I changed my phone number. Only Grandma and a few trusted friends have it. My business. Thriving. After the Thanksgiving drama made its way through the family grapevine, I actually gained several high-end clients. Apparently, being the reclusive black sheep with millions and a backbone attracts the kind of people who value discretion. Rachel? Still posting about toxic relatives and the price of betrayal. Last I heard, she's trying to start her own jewelry authentication business. She listed herself as an industry disruptor on LinkedIn. Her website features copy she clearly lifted from mine. Mom and Dad? After the legal letter, they went radio silent. According to a mutual cousin, they now tell everyone that they never wanted my money anyway. They claim they're praying for my soul. How noble of them. The irony. They still live in the house I secretly helped them save with years of payments. But now, they act like I never existed. Good. Because I've never felt more real. No more Sunday dinners pretending to be small. No more letting someone else dominate every conversation while I shrink into myself. No more supporting quietly. I wear what I want, say what I mean, and no longer pretend that being invisible is noble. My therapist says I've finally started to heal. I say I've finally started to live. And if you're wondering about the bracelet Rachel wore in her latest Instagram post, yes, the one she captioned authentic luxury, it's fake. Of course it is.